You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, how are you? I'm so excited to share that today I'm joined by Heather Chauvin. Heather is a TEDx speaker, author of Dying to Be a Good Mother, and host of the podcast Emotionally Uncomfortable. It has over 6 million downloads. Heather is a leadership coach who helps successful women who are ready to courageously and authentically live, work, and parent on their own terms. This episode is a full-fledged coaching session for me. I coughed, I cried, and I skipped over many questions around Heather's background. So I want to give you a little bit of that here in the intro. Heather started her career as a social worker, helping adults understand children's behavior. But it wasn't until her stage 4 cancer diagnosis in 2013 that pushed her to take a deeper stand for change, uncovering how cultural expectations sabotage our dreams. She's been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Real Simple Magazine, Mind Body Green, Google, and more. When Heather isn't working, you will find her living out what she teaches, which may include kayaking, hiking, or anything else that challenges what she believes is possible for herself. And of course, inviting her 3 children along for the journey. She believes that life is full of opportunities and that it's time to feel alive. So, forewarning, I left a lot of what would typically be considered edits into the show because, as Heather says, these are the vulnerable moments that women want to hear. I went into the interview anxious and honestly somewhat sick. I had recently lost my voice and regained it enough to keep the interview on the calendar. This conversation sparked a chain of events in my life that I will share more about in the outro once you have some context. In the meantime, I will share that we discuss opting out of toxic motherhood culture, giving ourselves permission to become, how to begin the process of self-discovery and why it matters so much. We talk about how to create systemic change, motherhood as leadership, navigating our relationships as we evolve, strengthening our courage muscles, and so much more. All right, so I won't keep you from it another minute. Here's Heather. Hey, Heather, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Christy, thank you so much. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes, well, let's be real. We're excited because I'm about to tell you how you already made me cry today.
Yes, that's what brings me joy.
Yes, I was just refreshing myself on who you are and what you're about and your book and your podcast, and I watched the trailer for your book. And what got me was the whisper. Not this, not this. And oh Lord, came the waterworks. Yeah. You talk about this whisper and women not knowing how to access it. What does that mean?
Okay, so first I'm going to tell you this, not this, was actually I want to say a poem that I read from Elizabeth Gilbert.
Okay.
So the author of Eat, Pray, Love.
Mm-hmm.
And she had it on like, it was a Facebook status one day. And I read it on my podcast, obviously giving her credit and being like, you know, talking about, it was the definition of the whisper, right? It was almost like, oh my gosh, yes, 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 yes. And the feedback, the amount of outreach I got where people are like, yes, 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 not this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as women and humans in general, but I mainly talk to women.
Me too.
We know what we don't want.
Yeah.
So what I often hear is, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want. And I'm like, that's a lie that you're telling yourself, because you know the opposite. You know what you don't want. And that whisper, here's my dog barking in the background.
Okay.
His name is Steve. So when he pisses
Steve.
me off, I call him Steven. And I was like, Steven, be quiet. So I have a female dog too, but of course she doesn't cause any problems. It's always just the little male yippy one.
Obviously.
Yeah. And I'm like, Steven. I always yell at him. Anywho, so the whisper is that little voice inside of us that it's always there. It's always guiding us. But for whatever reason, we're like, I don't have time for you. I don't have time for you. You don't matter. It's not valuable. And she's always guiding us. And then we get to a point in our lives where we're experiencing so much contrast of not this, not this, not this, that our last hope is like, maybe we should actually try to listen to the whisper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know. And I can think of, you know, all of the things that are stopping me, you know, and they sound really legitimate. And they sound really hard to get through. And I say stopping me, but here I am interviewing you. I have a show, like I'm moving. Things just don't seem to be moving fast enough. The progression. And we are just talking about how I've sort of lost my voice and my vision board behind me has go big. And, you know, I don't know. I didn't really make that connection, which is interesting to me because I normally would. You know, like I grew up with my mom telling me that if I was congested, it's because I was confused about something. And one thing she always said was if I had a sore throat, it was because there's something I want to say that I'm not. And now, you know, all right, okay, there's things I want to say that I'm not. And oh gosh.
I'm like, this interview is going to turn into a coaching session.
I know. And I was so trying to be mindful of that.
But this is the intimacy that I love because this is the reality of life. Right. And when you're willing to go to those depths of like being really curious. So what you just said brought up for me when I'm always like, what am I doing? Because first of all, when you're in your own bubble, you're in your life, you can't see it, you're feeling it, you're hearing it. So you surround yourself with people that you trust. It can be people that you physically have paid, but also people that, you know, your circle, your next little inner influence of people. You're like, okay, this is my challenge. What am I not like, where's my blinders? What can't I see? And I just had this conversation with somebody on my team this morning. I'm like, this is how I feel. I don't believe that this is my reality. So tell me what it is. But what I heard you say is you're like, it's not happening fast enough. It's typically not because we're not attracting it. It's because we're holding ourselves back.
Yeah.
And I'll give you my book as an example. So my book, Dying to Be a Good Mother, came out in March of 21. So it's been, at the time of this recording, almost a year. I have had the whisper of writing a book for a good 15 years, except part of it was understanding this is a whisper, it's a desire. And then part of it was, do I feel really called to act on it now? Like, you know, when you're like, that feels really far away, it doesn't feel accessible right now, but you're like, okay, I'm just going to keep blowing on that whisper. I'm just going to give it more energy. And then on the other side of that, there was a point where I was starting to get angry at myself because I wasn't taking action on that. So you can feel it coming. And then all of a sudden you're like, now I'm just annoyed with myself. When you know you're annoyed with yourself, you're getting angry at yourself. You're like, I'm done. I'm done. That's when you have avoided the whisper for so long that the universe, whatever you want to say, or, you know, your beliefs, it's like, you've now like outgrown that container of space, and it's just like a flower or a tree, like in a pot, and its roots are just busting through. And it's like, get me out of here. I need more. I need to grow. I need a bigger container of space. And that's how I felt with my book. And I kept telling myself, I don't know how to write. I'm not a writer. I can't find the right people to help me. But nor was I taking any action to get the right support. And then the second that I did it, I had I had a decision to make. Am I going to go traditional or non-traditional? And then I was using that as the excuse. And then I was like, okay, well, here's your choices. Like, you have to make a decision. It's not about right or wrong. It's about a decision. Be decisive. And the reason why I wasn't making a decision is because I was afraid I was going to fail. So sometimes things move quickly, but we have to like face our fear, and we have to strengthen those courage muscles.
All right. And I'm gonna respond, and then I will make this about you. But I'm putting a lot of weight on time. I'm doing this. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old is in school 3 days a week. My son is home with me all day, every day. And so I'm doing this while he naps. And I usually say after they go to bed, but honestly, by then I'm so tired. I'm so spent that if I do something, it's because it's scheduled. It's an interview. It's, you know, but anyway, I absolutely know, I think, especially after the last 2 years of what the world has gone through and what we've gone through as mothers, I'm not meant to be home full time with my children. I just know that. And for us right now, it's about getting the ducks in the row to afford sending little man into daycare, because I'm busting at the seams. I'm yelling. I'm frustrated. I'm doing things like when I sit down and talk to my therapist, when I sit and talk to, I have a speaking coach, you know, they remind me of all of the things I actually am doing. You know, they're like, hey, you launched this challenge. Hey, you have this show. You've upped it to 2 a week. You know, you're doing things. But I feel so stifled by my everyday singing blippy songs and making lunches and how many bags of goldfish do you want to eat? Like that, I start to lose my mind, and I start to lose sight of what I'm doing. And you talk a lot about that disconnect from self, and I've read, and it reminds me of this because, you know, I over the last 2 years I've experienced depression, anxiety, things like this, but it's all coming from this disconnect from self. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it should be that hard to get back to it, but it is. It's like when I have a conversation with someone like you, it's like, done. We're just making decisions. I feel motivated. And then I wake up the next morning and I'm like back in my reality, and I'm like, what just happened in the last 24 hours?
I feel this though. Like first of all, I was in that very similar situation where I had this strong desire to spend more time my perception of time with my children.
Opposite problems.
Which was this, well, no, it wasn't that I didn't want to be with them, but when I was with them, it was like, not this, not this, not this. So I was telling myself that I want to be with my children more, but what it was is I actually yearned for this connection. It wasn't about time, and then also I was saying I want to be with my kids more because I was so riddled in guilt and fear of failing as a mother that I believed that if they were closer to me, then that guilt would go away. So it's almost like numbing pain by eating, or like that was my drug of choice, was over mothering. So then when I decided to, I remember having no money, like we had no money, and I would have somebody come in the house for like 2 hours a day, like, and I'd pay her like $40 or whatever it was. She wasn't a good fit, but whatever. She came in, she kept him alive, and I would be in the other room doing my thing. And I was just like, I would feel guilty because I'm like paying somebody, like the mental back and forth. But I will tell you, the biggest like relief for me was when I would talk to a woman that's like, I was totally there. If I had to like make one more sandwich, I would lose it. Like even now, I'm like, you got to eat again. Yeah. Like there's this non-domestic part of me. And then I feel guilty because I feel like I'm missing a piece of like woman or mother. And I'm like, you know what? If my version of being a good mother to you means I'm like alive and well, and we can have intimate conversations, and I'm not going to yell at you and you feel loved and safe, you know what? You're going to say my mom sucked at cooking, and that's okay. Like I can't be great at everything, but I just want you to know that you're loved.
Yeah. And how old are your boys now?
17, 12, and 9.
Wow. Okay. All right. So this is touching on something you talked about in your recent show, this toxic motherhood culture and deciding to opt out. Like, I'm obsessed with this, but how? Like, how do you opt out? And what would you say you're actually opting out of? Yeah.
So my podcast was called Mom is in Control. And that was what my target market was saying. I'm a mother. I feel out of control. I want to feel in control. And I'm like, 100%, I feel that. And especially with COVID, I just saw this like cry for help of like, we're drowning. And then culturally being like, that's okay. We're all in the middle of a pandemic. And I don't know if it's like my human design, my personality, but I'm like, I want to be a part of the conversation of the solution, not this repetition over and over and over again. Like, I don't want to be a politician talking about the problems. I actually want to be a doer in creating the solution. So I'm like, if I am going to do that, I've gotten to a point in my personal development where I'm like, I just need to become. I'm becoming the exact like role model for all of the women that are behind me or next to me that are like, I just needed permission to do this. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. So if me doing it gives you permission, let's do that. But here's the thing. So I'm very sensitive. And I've always felt energies, right? So someone walks into a room, you're like, oh, something's off. Like they're in a bad mood. You can feel that. So I opt out of everything that does not serve me. So when I see something on Instagram and it's a woman saying, you know, on my 10th cup of coffee, this is how you get through motherhood, or, you know, sleep, who needs that? I'm a mother. Like all of these cliche memes, I'm like, haha, funny and so toxic for the woman that's watching that, who's struggling, going, I don't remember the last time I had a good quality sleep. And I'm like, throw Cheerios on the floor, put your kid in a baby gate if you have to, and nap. And then when someone is telling you, you know, it's so toxic. Or, you know, even when you see these perfect photos on Instagram and she writes out what she's going to say on this damn bulletin board, and you're thinking, you had time to take like you had time to put that on the board. Like that probably took you a good hour to put that together and to clean the background behind you to take this perfect photo. But you're telling me you don't have time to go for a walk. You don't have time to take a nap. You don't like, I'm like, wow, like opt out. So I'm here to say motherhood. Yes, we have a lot of generational baggage of women's like value in the world, which I think is hilarious because every single human that you meet, it goes back to like, I wonder what their parents were like. And the mother wound, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, mothering is the greatest leadership role in society. And people value mothers. They're like women and children first. And yet they crap all over them and they don't give them equal rights and benefits and all of that. So I think we're very, very strong and we can hold a lot, but it doesn't mean we need to suffer. And if we actually treated ourselves in a role according to, like, if you were in a corporation and you were at the very top and you were failing, everyone around you would be like, you need to increase your performance because it's trickling down, right? Like, what's going on here? Like, you're going to lose your job if the performance doesn't come. Do you need mental wellness? What do you need? I mean, if you're in a decent corporation, they might actually care about you. But my point is, they're going to notice. They're going to give you that feedback. Why don't we do this to women?
Yeah.
Mothers, like, you matter. In your house matters. You are not on call 24/7. And even if you're single and nobody else lives in your house, you're the one who needs to give yourself a break and say, hey, you're watching TV right now. Like, I'm going to put you in the safe container of space and I'm zoning out for 20 minutes with my headphones on. Like, I am enough and I'm going to integrate you, child, into my life. You can come for walks with me. You can come to me with the gym if there's childcare. Like, all of these things, it's like, what do you need? And then forcing yourself to do that. You have to fight for your joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
You can see I'm very passionate about this.
Yes, I know. And you know what? I like what you said, going back, about being part of the solution, because something that I've said a lot on the show is, we're really good at talking ourselves in circles. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people out there now. There's a lot of women on social media that have podcasts. I talk to them and they're excellent and they have really great things to say. But if we just keep going back and forth with each other, it's not enough. There needs to be action. There needs to be systemic change throughout our society. And I'm not the person to do it, but someone has to be. Like, I don't know.
Here's the thing with systemic change. Like, there's a few the people that I follow, I actually don't follow a lot of people, but the people that I follow currently that I respect mm-hmm. are the people that are like, we all know the problem. I'm literally part of the solution. Mm-hmm. And systemic change in anything comes from people opting out of the system, mm-hmm. like giving pushback to the system.
Starting with the individual.
100%. Yeah. So you are a contributing factor to the system. Even if it's in your home, you're taking a stand for women who are like, I'm at home and this is not sustainable. And I have to opt out of this cultural system of, and I'm using air quotes, stay at home mom, like legit house manager, life manager. Mm-hmm. And I need to rework my job description and also how I'm going to say pay myself, but like value myself for the work that I do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what that looks like. And also our children. Like, let's talk about childcare and affording childcare. I mean, one, sometimes we can afford it, but there's just a lot of guilt around actually investing in it. Mm-hmm. Two, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe you're like, I'm going to try one day and it could be with somebody else. And then we'll like just slowly integrate into that. like dollar for dollar. Like I remember I'm like, if I make $100, then I can afford somebody to clean my house for $100 and then I'll be working, but they're cleaning. And we just gotta like push our mental boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. It's reminding me of when you hear someone say, or just whatever out there, it's like, just because it always was doesn't mean it has to stay that way, and it's reminding me of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's uncomfortable.
So we were talking quite a bit about what we're opting out of. Is it appropriate to ask what you opt into?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like on the daily for you?
So first of all, I mean, you learn a lot about yourself as an individual. I think every single human is designed uniquely, and you have to find what works for you, and it's not going to work for everyone. But I now believe, I mean, if we believe feeling like crap equals good mothering, then our brain tries to find things, right? Like I'm fatigued, I'm being good. Like we're not taking ownership. Mm-hmm. I now believe that the better I feel, that equals success. Mm-hmm. So I opt in to anything that allows me to feel alive. Like in my business, for example, we were growing rapidly. I understand that there's moments of like, not this, I don't like this, it doesn't feel good, but it's temporary. It's a what do you call it? Growing pain. Mm-hmm. It's a contraction. It's not my business model. It's not the whole thing, right? So I'm like, this is not sustainable. I'll handle it for a month or two, but after that, I'm done. I'm like, how can I? I'm always focused on how can I? So movement is big for me. And I will tell you, I do not identify as somebody who loves working out. But in the last 2 years, I experienced the contrast of like losing my mind, and I had to figure out movement, but not from this diet culture place, from a place of like feeling really strong and healthy in my body, and nutrition as well. And so I invested in that. And then I'm still working on seeping that into my identity, and how people see me and how I see myself in that way are different. I love learning new skills, but like when it comes to raising my children, I'm always like, what do I want? What does my husband want? What do the kids want? And then how can we create this concoction together? Not what does everyone else want to do? Okay, fine, I'll just follow along. It's like, what brings you joy? What brings you joy? And sometimes you have to test, the kids when they don't want to do it. And you're like, no, we're going for a hike. We're doing this thing. So I opt into adventure. I opt into anything that makes me feel really good. I opt into spending time with people who bring me joy. I've actually gotten to the point where I'm like, someone's like, do you want to go for coffee? Do you want to go for a walk? And I'm like, every time I'm with you, I just feel a little like, ugh. So I'm like, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. Like I'm very boundaried.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you said, instead of saying, what does everyone else want and I'll go with it, I actually also, what comes to mind to me is the opposite, is that I feel like I'm often pushed to a point where I have to like lay a law down, and that never works. And so I really like that for me, the reminder of it has to incorporate everyone in the house. And I wonder about that too. So deciding, say, okay, I'm going to opt out of toxic motherhood culture and I'm going to prioritize what makes me feel alive. I hesitate to ask this, but I need to. Where does your husband sit with that? How was that received? And how did you guys work through that?
I love this question. I get it a lot. So I will come back to the husband thing, but your first thing of like, I have to lay down the law means you're in the red zone.
Yeah, I'm beyond.
Yeah. And there's something that happened before the red where you let the boundary slide.
Okay. All right. You're calling
So
me out.
You asked for it.
I
So
know.
there's the yellow zone,
Yes.
what I call the yellow zone. And, it's like, oh, come on, come on, come on. And like, I just leave the room. Right. So my teenager does this to me a lot. Like, hey, can I do this? Like the kids do it all the time. Hey, can I have this? Can I have this? Can I have this? And I'm like, no. And then, they come and push. And I literally look and I'm like, I don't repeat myself twice. And then and then they say it again and I look and I'm like, and they're like, nah, and I opt out. Yeah, I opt out.
Disengage.
So I will tell you, with my husband, I've had this conversation many times because women really are challenged with it. I ask him often, like, people wonder why, or they're like, how do you get your husband to support you? Or how do you like get him to like do more around the house or whatever the thing is? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he looks at me and he goes, oh, we wouldn't be married. Like, we wouldn't be married if that, like, he's like, he's like, I already know that wouldn't be your thing. And so I think part of it is when we are becoming different people, like our identity, we have to be patient with the people that are energetically attached to us. Mm-hmm. And expect pushback. Yeah. But you also deserve to be heard and understand that you're not just going to say it once. Mm-hmm. So an example, a lot of clients will say things to me like, oh, I had a woman the other day say, oh, I just need to get, everyone on board and blah, blah. I was like, you don't need to get anybody on board. Like, what happens if you get COVID and you are out of commission for a week or two and you're stuck in your room? Who's going to do all the other things? Mm-hmm. Someone's going to figure it out and everyone's going to survive. My point is, why are we have to take ownership that we're trying to control some things. Like, what do you want? Come up with hey, I mean, we would have weekly meetings. Mm-hmm. And I would be so angry and resentful in those weekly meetings. But what I had to do was come back to my discernment over and over and over again of who do I want to be? How do I want to feel? And then I would come with the story of like, why do I always have to be the responsible one? Mm-hmm. In my head? And I'm like, that's my mother's story. That's my like childhood story. I got to heal that. That has nothing to do with my husband. So I'd come to this meeting and I would say, here's what my week looks like. Okay, there's all of these other things on the to-do list. Like, I'm overwhelmed. Can you help me? What can you take off this list? And they're like, oh, I'll take the list for you. You're like, no. Like, what's one thing? And then they would take the one thing and I would write it down. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. And then I'd write it down. And the next day I would say, hey, just curious, did you make that doctor's appointment? And he's like, no. I'm like, cool. When are you going to make it by? And I would track it. Okay, Friday. Awesome. I'll ask you on Friday. And I had to teach him how to support me. It's not that they don't want to help. Mm-hmm. This goes back to how they were parented. Yeah. And it sounds awful, but they're not our children. And we need to stop treating them like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just finished reading Helen Peterson's Can't Even, how Millennials became the burnout generation. And she was talking about this dynamic, and she referenced a book, and she's talking about how, men will say, like, a husband will say, oh, my wife will come in and say, can't you just vacuum while you're watching the game? And so he'll vacuum, but he won't actually do it, right? Like, he'll just like do it to say he did it, but not fully do it well. And then he'll just decide, well, she came in and said, I didn't do it well enough, so I'm just not going to do it anymore. And she made that connection of like, if you did that at work, if like women are the supervisors of the house, and if your supervisor came to you and said, you didn't do the best job at that, would you just say, well, then I'm just not going to do it anymore? Like, women have been put in this position to run the house, mm-hmm. and to be the boss. But the spouses It's like they want to be told what to do and they're the employee, but then when they don't do it right, it's like they just opt out. To use I have that on the brain because you've said it, but it's like, well, just never mind. And this is the only dynamic that would actually work in to some extent. And
but then what happens is the woman overcompensates.
Yeah.
And she's like, fine, I'll just do it myself then.
Yeah.
And then she adds that additional task to her plate instead of saying, first of all, women can multitask. Like our brains are actually designed to multitask. Not that it's good, but we can actually do it. I don't think it's healthy to multitask, but we can. Like I could be doing something and talking to my husband. He's like, whoa. I'm cutting cheese. Wait until I'm done cutting cheese and then we can have this conversation. So if he's watching a game, there's no way he's vacuuming at the same time where we are designed to do that. So my point is, one, it's a brain thing. And two, it's like, how can we have a conversation after and say, hey, I see I asked you to vacuum. I see there was no energy or effort into that. Like, do you want to do it again and again and again and again? Like, how can we? And I just don't want to be angry and resentful in my relationship. So I'm like, what baggage am I bringing to this conversation?
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, I've done a lot of work in figuring out how much of the frustration in the dynamic is the assumptions I'm putting on it. Like, oh, he's not doing that because it's like, no, it just doesn't occur to him, you know? And I think what you're saying about almost teaching, right? It's a lot of work. And that in itself is frustrating. I think that the end goal of what you're talking about is beneficial, right? Like now that all the boys in your house, all the men in your house kind of know how things are. And if they weren't this way, then you wouldn't be married. But to get to that point is a ton of work. And that's still even on us to do. Like that, I'll do it because the end goal is what I want, but that's frustrating as heck to me.
Oh, 100%. And I'll tell you, I'm on the other side of that. So my husband and I did a complete role reversal. So he was the breadwinner. And then I kind of stayed at home. I was in school, had part-time jobs, paid the vacation fund, and then it flipped. And now my husband works within the company, like the company I built. And he does more of the domestic roles. So we're actually experiencing the opposite. You want me to do it again? Why don't we just laugh hysterically and be like, it doesn't matter how much you try to plan anything in life. This is what happens.
Oh, God. Okay. All right. So, Heather.
I'm assuming you're actually recording this. I can't see anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going.
Freaks me out because I usually see a little record button.
I know, but I'm like crazy about it. It's there. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So you're experiencing the opposite. You've done a role reversal. Your husband was the breadwinner, and now he's actually working as part of your company.
100%. So I had an identity crisis because I was actually letting go of some of those domesticated roles and also the woman, and I'm using air quotes, responsibilities of getting the kids out of bed in the morning, getting them off to school, making them breakfast. And I was actually finding this lack of purpose, lack of fulfillment in the nurturer in me. And so I have to balance that because we want to co-parent, or some people are in, separated families, and you're like, what is that within me that's trying to find that fulfillment? And yet we know that we need more space and capacity. And it's always this tug, right? This tug, but it took a really long time. But I will tell you now, my husband's like, put your dish in the dishwasher. Pick up your clothes.
You mean?
To me.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, part of the reason why, first of all, I've never been a meticulously clean person. Of course, when I had to do it, I was like, whatever. So I've gone back into like my teen like brain,
funny.
which is like, I have to consciously be like, okay, these dishes are dirty. Put the bowl in the dishwasher, because he'll clean up after me, like legit right after me. And so when women are talking about this, I feel guilty because I'm like, I experienced the opposite. But I will also tell you that I've told him, stop enabling me. Stop enabling me. Don't do it for me. And he's like, what? What do you mean? You want me to call you out? I said, yes. And I'm like, this is exactly why women get mad at their partners, because they're doing it for them.
I'm emotional about it. That's the thing. Like, I have a tickle in my throat. I'm not trying to like make more of it than it is, but like, I've literally been anxious about this all day. And I can feel in my stomach that it's subsided, but it's like I'm gonna cry now. Like, it's like, I'm just like, I feel like so stuck, you know? I'm just, and everything you're saying, and I'm
It's not surprising to me that you're coughing. Like, I'm not kidding. It's just, to me, I call it an emotional poop. It's coming up and out. Like, the body is like, let it out, let it out, let it out. I just had a client that was like, I've never been sick so many times in my life than joining this program. And she's like a health coach. And I was like, it's coming up and out. Like, your body is releasing it.
Do you know what's so funny is that I went to the doctor about a month ago because I've been getting sick so much. And some of it is, right, I have toddlers, they're in daycare, they come home with something new every 5 seconds. But like, none of my kids are sick right now. And I'm also going, shouldn't my immune system be a little stronger than theirs? Like, why am I catching everything they do? Okay. Oh my gosh. I probably won't edit much of this out.
Good. These are the conversations that people need to hear. The reality of transformation and life, because what they see on the other side of that is like, oh my gosh, how did she get there? And it's like, she had to like go through a birth canal. That was not comfortable.
I know. And you know what I think part of it for me is right now is sort of, you know, and being a viewer of you and your work and your show and everything. It's like, it feels so far away. Like, where you are and where you're sitting and everything you're saying, like, feels so far away for me right now. And it's like, I've come so far. But I'm also really, like, I think coming to terms with like how much I've put on other people, and I put on my husband and my kids as being the reason why I feel this way. And it's there's reality of that, but there's also just me not saying things need to change. And really, like when you said, you know, your husband saying, we just wouldn't be married. You said it casually, but that's so deep. Like, that is such a deep understanding between two people. And to really actually picture myself sitting down with my husband, who is going to listen to this, and I love you so much. Like, to sit down and be like, this has to change or we're not married anymore. Like, that's so uncomfortable. But it's there. Like, it's just because, and I don't think it's just in my case, it's not that he wants nothing more than for me to be happy, but I'm like, I'm enabling my unhappiness.
9 out of 10 times when I'm hearing these stories, it's the woman saying, the crazy thing is he will support me. He will do anything for me. And that other situation where it appears that the partner is not supportive, what they're actually experiencing is a partner who's terrified to lose them. And so it, you know, I think it goes both ways, but I think you may have a fear that you're going to lose your partner if you grow, because I remember being there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, I mean, I wouldn't have had the clarity to put it that way, but yeah. And but that is certainly where the question of where did your husband fit into this? How did he feel? How did you get to that point? Because that's scary for me right now. You know, like I want to be, it's hard to rock such a big boat, you know, like I don't know. I don't have anything clear to say on it because I am not clear on it yet for me. But,
and I don't think it has to be, I think we do very well with like this all or nothing.
Yeah.
And also, like you wake up one day and look around and be like, why is there so many toys around the house?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't just explode that way. You don't notice these things. It's 1 degree, right? So you're just like, you know what? I'm going to commit to doing this small thing for myself for 30 days. It's going to be mildly, I call it emotionally uncomfortable, right? For you. And you're like, this is uncomfortable. And then you do that and you're like, okay, look, wow, my life hasn't really changed. The only thing that's changed is I feel a little bit better. Okay, now I'm going to strengthen those courage muscles some more. But yeah, you're so close to a breakthrough. Like you're so close, which is why you're like, oh my God, my life is going to blow up. And then you take the action and you're like, really? Oh my gosh, everything is the same. Like, I'm going to put this book out into the world. I'm going to divulge all these things. I do it. And everyone's like, hey, did your book launch yet? And I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
I know that feeling. I do. And I think, you know, all right. So your book, Dying to Be a Good Mother, I'm going to assume now in talking to you that those listening know some of your story, because I want to get to I know it, so I want to get to my questions about it. And you know what? If they don't, they can watch your TEDx. That gives a little snippet. And in that you talk about, you know, having cancer, and it gave you permission. Like, I've suffered enough. I can now do what I want to do and create the life that I want. What do I desire? What do I want? What do I crave? And I've not been through that to that extent. But I remember at the beginning of the pandemic and quarantine and having those moments of, when this is over, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And life just kind of has a way of going right back to where it was before all of that. Like when I was in it, it was very intense. And I wonder for you, how do you keep it tuned up? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you not let yourself slip back and into those same habits that you were in before the big moments?
Yeah. It gave me, cancer saved my life. It gave me so much. But that wasn't even the first like moment I had. Like, mothering really kicked my ass, like coming into motherhood. You're like, here it goes again. I'm so excited for you to email me like in a few weeks and be like, Heather, I had my nervous breakdown and my breakthrough, and this is amazing.
Oh my God. I just I don't know how I just got through that sentence, but I did. And now I can't stop coughing for you to answer it, because I want to know the answer so badly.
Okay. So
cancer.
Yes. I felt like I was pushed back into a corner. Like, I had a lot of fear, and I was like, I have to go through this. I have to live and survive. And so my focus was survival. And it was like, failure was not an option. failure was not an option. And the fear of the unknown was so big, right? The fear, but I'm like, I just got to focus here. And I know that I'm not guaranteed tomorrow, but I have to like believe that there is a tomorrow. And that's like that laser focus. Like that was a muscle that I built, but I don't apply that today. I mean, you get comfortable, right? We're in our pain. We're like, I'm going to change. I'm going to change. Next week, you're not in pain. And you're like, yeah, okay, here I am again. So to be honest, I have ebb and flow, ebb and flow, ebb and flow, but I purposely put myself in uncomfortable situations now. Like I know that I'm going to backslide. It's human nature, and I'm very comfortable, and I've achieved way more today in my health and every area of my life than I've ever thought possible for myself. So I'm constantly like reinvesting in myself, putting myself in this container of space, surrounding people, like putting people around me that are like, you don't get to back out of this. Like the only way out is through. So when people are like, I don't have the willpower. And I'm like, I don't either. I put myself in incredibly uncomfortable situations all the time. And I'm like, the only way out is through to get me to that next level.
Yeah. And is that a lot of what you're doing in your programs? Like you're helping people through those, like what does it look like to work with you?
Yeah. So whether like I have two main programs, one's mastery and one's mastery business. So mastery is like the personal side of people. Like what's the fulfillment? What does that look like? Like feeling on purpose, living on purpose, like the emotional intelligence piece, the time management piece. And then the business side is that plus how do I make money now? Like I'm doing all the things. How do I make money now? Which money and worth so connected. Yeah. Like if you don't value yourself and your worth, you're going to be like, people won't pay me that. They will. You're just not owning it. So it's so connected. But yeah, it's a large investment. They say yes. What's your vision? And I'm always like, what do you want? Okay, you know what you don't want. What do you want? Like, it doesn't have to be a perfect vision. Let's start moving towards it. And then when all those things are coming up, we're working towards it and you're in that container of space. So you can't back out. Of course, you could be like, I want to back out. And it's like, awesome. Why? And then you got to keep facing it and keep moving forward.
Yeah, because it's a time commitment as well. It's not just, hey, let's chat for an hour. They're in it for weeks, if not months with you.
Yeah. I mean, we do have smaller programs that are 2 months, but usually they're 8 to 10 months. But the funny thing is about the time commitment, people think this takes a long time. And if you actually allot your time, you do things in 15-minute increments consistently. So the reason why we have a longer period of time is because when you're doing small things consistently over time, it creates transformation, which is the complete opposite of what people want to buy into. Yeah. They want to buy into short amount of time, pressure, pain, suffering. And then when that support is no longer there, they fall back into old patterns. And I want people to say, even if we get another pandemic or shutdown, I got this. That's true transformation.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Yes, because we want the instant gratification, but it's not what sticks.
Yeah.
It has to be integrated all the way through.
100%.
Given the pandemic, what have you learned about yourself in this time over the last 2 years?
To be honest, when it first happened, I had deja vu of like when I was going through treatment and I was like, I've been here before. And I actually felt extremely alone because I'm like, now the world is going to know what I felt. Oh. And I'm like, I have 8 years on people. Wow. And I was like, I just remember feeling so like I was in a crisis state or emotion or survival mode in so many areas of my life when I was diagnosed, that when I did so much work in all areas of my life to get into a thrival state, so that when COVID happened, not only was I mentally, physically, emotionally, financially prepared, that when that stress was happening and that like, you know, chaos, or the kids were out of school because we were homeschooling for a year, it took a little bit out of the cups. You know, those buckets were slowing down, but there was no crisis. There was no survival mode. And I just keep telling people, stop trying to pretend things are going back to normal.
I know.
And don't just hold your breath and wait for the clouds to part. You're waiting for something outside of you. Yeah. Pay attention to what is not sustainable in your life and fix that. So if it was your income, be like, I can't just live paycheck to paycheck anymore. I have to have more for emergency funds. If it's, you know, if it's the relationships, like it was an overhaul. But honestly, it has taught me, it's been so much confirmation. And I think just giving myself more permission that if something does not serve me, I don't need to say yes to it. Like people, events, all of that.
Yeah. What's something that you're working on that you want to improve on yourself?
Lots of things. People don't believe me when I say that because they see a different version of me than I do. Mm-hmm. I would say it's doing, it's the habits in the areas that I don't yet identify. So movement, the food, you know, just like feeling more creative, compassion. Like, although I like legit teach compassion and connection, we teach what we need to learn. Sometimes I get very triggered. Like my go-to emotion is anger, and I don't do that with my kids, but I'll do that with like, you know, other people, and they don't know I'm angry. I'm like, why did I just go right there? Why can't I just be more compassionate? Yeah, I think because I still need to, you know, there's a part of myself I need to be more compassionate with.
It always comes back to the self, really.
Yeah, I'm like, well, if I do it to myself, then I'm nicer to other people. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's the habit formation for sure. And definitely not beating myself up because I see it. I want to be there already. And so I'm like, look how far you've come. You will get there. Be patient and just do the work you need to do.
All right. And we've talked a lot about this in not so directly, but I'm going to ask you about, you know, what comes to mind for you when I say self-care, like as part of your work, you know, because I have an issue with this word, this terminology.
Yeah, I try not to even use it a lot because the belief and conversation around self-care is selfish. And to me, self-care is free. Like it shouldn't cost you anything. It's about, you know, it goes back to like, how do I want to feel? And what do I need? Do I need a glass of water? Do I need a bath? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to like not respond? How about self-care of not feeling guilty that my friend texted me yesterday and I haven't responded back today, and I read it and I'm still thinking about it. And I am like, oh, I'm mean. I didn't respond back. She's going to think I'm avoiding her. And I'm like, no, I just didn't make it a priority. I don't have the capacity. And self-care is just taking yourself off the hook for those types of things and saying, kids, I love you deeply. And somehow you picked me to be your mom. And I'm sorry, but it's beans and rice again. Like just taking your, like being you, like what feels like me, you know, like lately I've been thinking a lot about creativity. And that's something that I've always been a creative person, but I haven't identified as one. So I'm like, you know, just what do I want? What do I crave? What does that look like? Maybe I can take an art class that has nothing to do with business, nothing to do with parenting. My kids don't have to come to the art class with me. Like just giving yourself permission to be like, what do I want to explore? And even if you're just listening to a podcast on that topic or reading a book, like just dang, we put way too much pressure on ourselves and overcomplicate everything.
Yeah. All right. And I just lastly want to ask you, in the work that you do in your coaching programs, does any overarching theme or anything really ever surprise you, catch you off guard?
At this point, not much catches me off guard because I've been at it for a while.
A long time, yeah.
But I will say what I thought I was teaching women and what I'm actually teaching them are two different things. And I didn't understand that until I asked them what they learned on the other side, whether it was in parenting, business, a relationship. And they said, I learned to trust myself. Trust my desires, trust what I needed, trust myself to say yes, trust myself to say no, trust that I knew what to do in an uncomfortable moment, deep self-trust.
What did you think you were teaching them?
Well, they would tell me, like, how do I get my child to listen to me?
Oh.
And then I was like, oh, this is how you get your children to listen to you. Like, you really got to listen to yourself. Yeah. And then in business, same thing. Like, how do I attract my ideal client? How do I talk a lot about sales, and it comes back to the same thing, is like compassion and deeply listening to somebody. And how do you attract your ideal client? Well, you have to let yourself be seen. Like, do you trust yourself? Do you think you're even good enough to be seen? Like, it all comes back to the self.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Heather, I'm sure there are 1,000 things, but is there any one thing that you would have asked yourself that I didn't think to, or any final thoughts that you have based on how this, I don't even know what you would call this. Would you still call it an interview?
We need to come up with a new word that's like, interview sesh, like
interview sesh. Yes.
Yeah, interview sesh.
Oh my God.
I want to say like interview therapy or something. Yes. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I don't think there's anything I would ask. Some people ask me, like, what's the one thing? And I'm like, listen, we got here believing one thing, that self-care is selfish, that putting yourself last is good mothering. How about we just try the opposite on and see what happens? Like, actually put yourself on your to-do list. And for me, it's like, I truly believe that the more alive you are in your work, in your body, in your mind, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I'm lit up. Like, yeah, you may not have gotten great sleep last night, but you have a plan to get great sleep this weekend. Or like, it's never going to be perfect, but the better you feel, that's literally the secret that everybody is searching for.
All right. Well, Heather, thank you. And it's like literally so embarrassing.
You have no idea how much joy you have brought me, because this is vulnerability, and which is why it feels embarrassing. But this is vulnerability, and that is what creates connection. And that is exactly what these ladies need to hear, because they're over there saying, can I just have a quick tip or strategy? And I'm like, you want to know the strategy? Be honest with yourself.
I know.
So
I know. Well, I know, because I've searched for the strategies, or it's like everything now is a life hack, and I'm like, I don't want to hack anything. I just want to not be tired anymore. Anyway.
When people are done with the hacks, they come to me. They're like, I'm done. Yeah. I'm not searching for a secret. Yeah. Like, I'm like, let's do the work. Let's do the emotionally uncomfortable work.
I know. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. This was interesting, but overall amazing. I appreciate you.
No problem. All right. Have a good day.
So, what did you think? Did any or perhaps all of this resonate with you too? I, of course, have to start off by thanking Heather for her kindness and patience while I quite literally coughed up my fears and anxieties to her face. But the good news is that following our conversation that day, I filled out the paperwork that had been sitting on the desk in our kitchen for weeks for my son to start daycare 2 days a week. I also had an uncomfortable conversation with my husband that night. I shared with him the idea of, quote unquote, teaching him how to support me. And I say the quote unquote thing because it's not meant to be condescending. It's meant to say, you're not a mind reader. We don't need the same thing. So here's what support looks like for me. It also requires me to know what support looks like and feels to me. I can't just go in and say I need more support without being specific about what it is that I need. I also shared with him some of the details of the conversation that's centered around that fear of losing your partner as you grow. And it's funny because I don't know what your reaction was to that, but when Heather said it, I knew exactly what she meant. And perhaps it was because we were talking about it in connection to her husband's statement of, well, then we just wouldn't be married. But I knew and she knew. And what I had to try to explain to my husband was that my fear of, quote unquote, losing him as I grow, for me doesn't actually translate to literally leaving and ending a relationship. It translates more to just those intrusive, terrifying thoughts of, is he going to like the person I'm becoming? Is the person I'm becoming going to still fit into this beautiful relationship that we've created? Will the person I'm becoming make him angry? Or will the person I'm becoming be angry with him? Will the person I'm becoming have compassion and empathy for him in the same way that I have in the past? And I ask these aloud not because they are simple or easy or comfortable, but because doing that work on myself right now feels so overwhelmingly transformational that it's like you start to wonder how any of your relationships or anything in your current life could ever be the same on the other side. So I guess what it really is the unknown. The work you're doing on yourself, the work I'm doing on myself, where it will lead is so unknown that I fear the other side to some extent. And we know that there isn't really another side. The work goes on, and the people who matter most to us, the people in our orbit, for example, my husband, I believe that he orbits with me. But it's still scary. I'm human and I have fears and self-doubt. Even if those fears and doubts are fleeting, they exist. And mostly because I don't want to lose him. I don't want to lose certain aspects of our relationship, our dynamic, certain aspects that once made us may look different in the future. A few experts and therapists that I've interviewed are coming to mind as I type this out and now say it to you. For example, Dr. Traci talking about grieving what once was and understanding that he and I might both grieve the loss of certain aspects of our life together as we move forward. That doesn't mean I don't believe that we do and will continue to move forward together. But, you just you don't know what's out there. And as far as my growth goes, I'm in a much better place than I was just a few months ago at the time of that recording. I'm recording this right now on a day where both of my kids have been in school since 9 a.m., and I've had a chance to breathe and take care of myself and work on my business. So, things are looking up. But if this conversation doesn't make you want to immediately go over to any or all of Heather's platforms and check her out, her podcast, her book, her social media, I don't know what will. She's amazing, and I'm so grateful to have shared this space with her. So thank you, Heather, and thank you for listening. See ya! Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.